Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Batwoman, the latest episode of Supergirl, the latest episode of The Walking Dead, as well as the series premiere of Watchmen. Like always, if I'm talking about something you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you don't want to hear what I had to say about this week's episode of Batwoman, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Supergirl, and or skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Walking Dead, and or skip to what I had to say about the series premiere of Watchmen. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Batwoman. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, you have Kate trying to at least stop, Alice's madness. The fact of the matter is, okay, you want to know where your boyfriend is? At the very least, all you have to do is stop killing people for 24 hours. That'll make me reconsider. The fact is, make her see like, okay, you're trying for this, so I'll potentially consider giving you your boyfriend back. Because it's sad because Alice is still under the impression where her dad gave up. It's also like, but I can't believe you gave up too, Kate. We're twins and everything. You should have felt something. You should have tried harder, which is like Kate did. Like, obviously that's something that's never left her mind, and it's just because her and her dad were under the impression that you were going because evidence proved that you were. But I don't think Alice knows that. We actually kind of get this interesting intro at the beginning where it seems like she was taken in by someone, whatever the case may be. It was someone who was like, she finds a face that was sliced off, and I guess like someone's wearing it like a mask or something. I don't know what to really make of that. It looked like a House of Horrors, and I'm wondering, is that kind of like the Mad Hatter's thing? Like, cause we know like in Gotham he hypnotized people. I don't know if there's something beyond that, like, or is this whole Alice in Wonderland thing something she concocted in her own mind just kind of to compensate for like the psychological damage what was caused with. But like, I'm curious, like who was it that had captured her? How long were they there? And how long was she there and everything? So that's why I'm wondering, is it the actual Mad Hatter that had her? Did she actually kill the Mad Hatter? I'm curious to see what the storyline ends up being with that. But like I said, we get a little bit in that direction. We'll kind of have to ultimately wait and see beyond that. But obviously, a lot of interesting things kind of go down in the respect of like Kate having this complicated situation. Once again, it's like she didn't sign up to become a Batman. She did it because it's like, hey, this was, what was going to help me, stop Alice. Especially now, it's like it's going to put me in a position where I'm protected while I'm trying to take down your goons and trying to bring you back to your senses. But now she's done the thing of giving the city too much hope, and now like so much rides on this. It's like she's like, I'm not Batman, but the city thinks Batman's bad, and even to the point there's a suit of Batman, like a mannequin or whatever, dressed up like Batman, thrown down and in front of like some steps, and there's blood, and there's a sign that says come out Batman. And Kate realizes like a lot of Batman's enemies are coming out the woodwork because they know that they think Batman's backing down, and once again, and I love that plays into like the whole thing of like, does Batman bring out the freaks, or do the freaks bring out Batman? It seems like there's kind of a little bit of, give and take, obviously depending on the continuity, because, it comes down to which villains are already established, which ones aren't. So I think that's kind of interesting. Well, we know at least a few, not too many, but we do know a few villains that exist in this continuity because of Elseworlds. So how many of the Batman villains already exist? Like, because we saw Bane's mask, but it was Bane specifically from Dark Knight Rises, because it had that particular mask. But regardless, like I forgot the other ones. There was a few that were kind of like, oh, this is, I want to say one was Penguin. One of them said Cobblepot. I think Penguin exists in this continuity, because I think I saw him in one of the jail cells in like Arkham during the Elseworlds, but I could be, it's been a while, so I don't remember as clearly. But nevertheless, I'm going on a bit of a tangent, but I thought that was kind of a neat element to it. This dude named Elliot showing up, him and Bruce go back. Well, his name's Tommy Elliott, but him and Bruce go back because they were actually childhood friends and stuff like that. But it's always been kind of like a, like, oh, they come from prominent families and stuff like that. So it's kind of a tug back and forth of like besties yet rivals. The moment he kept pushing to be like, oh yeah, I know Bruce is back in town. It's like, what? Why would you say that? It's like, oh, and it's like, oh, wouldn't you be upset, Kate, knowing that Batman's back in town? And it's like, I think he was fishing because he probably knew like the way Kate wasn't pissed off anymore must mean, oh, you must have found out that Bruce is Batman, which he must have known. Well, he doesn't talk about how long he's known, has he? I think I think he said he might have gone back like a couple months back. He paid someone off, which I love the little thing. He's like, oh, I paid someone to riddle me this, which is like, okay, so obviously establishing a riddle, which I think there was things in Elseworld that established him. But regardless, it's nice to know obviously he exists in its continuity, but it also must mean he knows Bruce's identity. And it's kind of an interesting thing because I know I've heard talks of like certain continuities and stuff like that where the Joker finds out Batman's identity, but he never tells anybody because it's like they got, like I always talk about, like the symbiotic relationship. There's like a yin and yang type of relationship that they kind of have. So it's like Joker doesn't want to spoil the fun, so he does know in certain storylines or continuities, but he doesn't really tell anyone else. I mean, because it ruins the fun. And I wonder, is the Riddler the same way of like, oh, I know your identity, but the fact of the matter is it's more fun if I know, and if someone figures it out, that's interesting. But he'll probably play games with that and probably play it into some of Batman's storylines in this particular continuity. I think that's kind of neat. I always like that where continuity exists where like villains know, especially when you have a secret identity. Once again, that's something that doesn't really pop up too much in the Marvel movies and stuff like that, because Peter's kind of the only one technically with a secret identity, Peter Parker, and that's something I've kind of constantly talked about. Whereas like DC stuff really plays into the whole like, oh, you have a secret identity type of thing, which that in itself is kind of always a thing of like, you know, always like the superhero persona, and something I've talked about before, like that the superhero persona tends to be the real person, whereas their alternate, you know, their alias, their secret identity is meant to be the mask. That actually kind of got me thinking about something, because we saw Kate at the party, obviously, you know, that Elliot, that, you know, Tommy invited her to. And it kind of got me thinking, it's like, well, we know Bruce plays up like the rich playboy angle to kind of play up of like, oh, you know, that's, you know, playing into his secret identity. I'm wondering what Kate's going to do to kind of play into it. I guess because she's kind of got that rebel bad girl type of vibe too. So I guess all she would have to do is play that up. But I'm curious, is that just all there is, or is there going to be more to it? Because obviously there's people already asking questions about what the hell is Kate up to, you know? So she's going to have to come up with some cover, and I'm curious to see what that ends up being. But obviously, once again, I'm going on a bit of a tangent. So regardless, we do have Mary being shadowed by Sophie, who is now her bodyguard and everything, which complicates things because obviously Mary's doing the very like super illegal medical like center that she's running, so it makes it harder for her to do her thing when she has someone literally following her, but it's for her protection. But at the same time, Sophie did kind of volunteer for the job, and it's like it is a thing of like this way, because she knows that if she follows Kate around, Kate is going to be super against it, and then it's also going to bring up questions like, well, why are you going to be following Kate? Once again, I wonder, their dad has to know their history, like, because the fact is Mary brought it up and everything, so it's like they already know. So I'm sure he'd be even more like, oh, are you doing this for other reasons? So I'm sure that's probably why Sophie didn't go down that route. So she did choose Mary, but even Mary sees through it, because it's like, oh, you're asking all these questions about Kate, because it's like, oh, Kate trained for 5 years to be a part of the Crows, but she walked away from it. Why is that? Don't you think it's strange? It's like, well, as you say, you know, as everyone knows, Kate's crazy. But, you know, Mary kind of puts it out there. The fact is, it's like, well, you're part of the Crows. She would rather walk away from 5 years in training than be, you know, having to work the same job with you. I mean, because even, you know, Sophie had admitted, she was like, oh, yeah, I told her to move on. So, which we see a little hint of that. I need to look into it. That actress who plays Regan, she looks so familiar. It is kind of nice to see that her and Kate kind of hit it off immediately. And it turns into this whole complicated thing, because Tyler's like, hey, you're Kate. It's like, so Sophie never actually told me, but how do you two know each other? It's like, oh, y'all went to that boot camp thing. And it's like, yep, that's all there is to it. Because Kate was like, I'm Kate from boot camp. It's all right. But it's like, but Regan figured out, it's like, oh, so your ex's hubby doesn't know that you two were exes. Now that's complicated. And even later Tyler asked her about it. It's like, why'd you keep that a secret? Like, it's like, what? I must have talked about it. I must have mentioned it. It's like, no, you didn't. And Mary's there and she's super awkward about it. She's like, yeah, maybe we should try prying open this door. Because it's like, yeah, because it's actually kind of sad, because that's super hurtful, because it's like, it's one thing to be like, okay, you don't want to, I guess it's one thing where you don't want to talk about your exes in general. I guess that's one thing. But the fact of the matter is, it's like, you don't talk about Kate at all, because I guess she doesn't even want to, like, throw it out there that she's, even if she's bisexual, she doesn't even want to throw it out there that she has any interest in women, because she's buried that side of herself for so long. And that means you go into such an extreme. You haven't even told your husband, you know, which is like, I mean, I get it, you know, you don't have to tell your partner about all your relationships, but that's, you know, that's a part of your heart you're hiding away from. And, you know, and I think you're hiding a part of who you are away. It seems shameful, and I'm sure Kate would take that too. It's like, not only did you not say anything about me, but it's also because you didn't say anything about me because you're ashamed of that you like women. So it's like, that's even more hurtful in the in the long run. So that was kind of an interesting development. But it is interesting to find out, Tommy is like the bad guy behind all this because he wants to get back at Batman, or rather Bruce, because they had this like back and forth. The fact is, he bought a tower near Wayne Tower and made it bigger. I even love, like, they're going up the elevator and it's the awkward moment of silence between like Mary, Kate, and Sophie. Which, side note, I should point out, the fact of the matter is, I completely forgot Ruby Rose is Australian, because I was watching something recently and she was talking in her accent. I was like, she has an accent. I was like, right, I forgot she's Australian, because because I know she's in Orange Is the New Black, because I've seen like clips of her in it, but I don't never watched a lot of stuff. The only thing that it clicked in my head was like, right, because she was in the first season of Dark Matter. She played this android and she used her natural accent in it. And I was like, right. I was like, I totally forgot. I love stuff like that. I don't know why. Once again, I get giddy about accents, so I like totally forgot until I started. And I was like, right, she's Australian. I totally forgot about that. So that's pretty dope. But nevertheless, I'm going off on a huge tangent. I didn't even talk about it either. The actor who plays Tommy. Is it Gabriel Mann? Is that his name? Yeah, he was Nolan in the ABC show Revenge. That's kind of like the thing I always kind of go to. Well, I know he was also in I forgot his character's name, but he was in season 4 of Ray Donovan as well. Regardless, that was me going on a bit of a tangent. But I was like, hey, Nolan from Revenge. But nevertheless, but getting back to what I was talking about, I thought it was kind of interesting, his reasoning for hating Batman. It's actually kind of interesting. It's kind of like the reverse of why Kate kind of hated Batman. It's like, I hate you because you saved my mom. It's like all that fortune was supposed to be mine, but now he's stuck taking care of his mom, who's kind of, I guess, whatever the circumstances were, just either she was just naturally batty, or the fact is that circumstances left her in a state where she's a little bit mad. And so he resents Batman for that. And it's like, I could come after Bruce at any point in time, but I want to come after him as Batman because it was Batman that ruined my life. So just to prove that he's better than Bruce in every way. And I love that he pulls out a gun and it's like, and Kate's like, I figured Bruce is bigger, kind of talking about the gun, which that gun can pierce through the Batsuit. It's literally, and I thought that was kind of interesting. And it shows you how calculated Bruce is, because he created a weapon that if anyone ever got their hands on the Batsuit, it'd be a weapon that can take down the Batsuit. So I thought that was kind of pretty dope. So obviously it's like, once again, the whole thing of like, I brought so much danger to so many people because I put on a bat suit. But the fact is, I'm not Bruce. I can't be Bruce. But that just means I've got to be someone else. And she officially in this episode becomes Batwoman, which is pretty dope. I don't know. It actually looks good. And I didn't even think about that until Alice had pointed out the red. And I was like, right. Because it's supposed to represent their birthstone and everything. So it's like, right, it symbolizes where we came from. So I just thought, and I like that being like a big, that the symbol, like the color actually, because it kind of reminds me kind of similarly of like, the L symbol. By that, I mean, the S for like Superman and Supergirl, what that means, that being the Kryptonian symbol for hope. It's kind of like that. There's a meaning behind it. I like that the red she wears has that meaning of being like, I never forget where I came from. I even love Alice being like, a red wig? Yeah, and they say I'm crazy. But nevertheless, it was also an interesting confrontation between Alice and Kate, because it's like, you say you don't care about me or want, because it's like she wants to create that divide. It's like, I don't want you thinking me as your sister anymore because Beth is dead. But which we, at both Kate and us as the audience, know that's not true, because she's trying to create this whole situation because she's trying to get back at her dad, but she wants Kate back in her life because she found that map. And I think in her mind is like, wait, so Kate did try looking for me. It's not like they completely gave up. I don't know whether she connects that to their dad or not, because their dad didn't give up for a while. He kept going for months, but I'm sure that's still going to be the thing of, well, you didn't really try. But it's like, I'm curious if, I think someone might have fed her the wrong information and making it seem like they did. Well, because for her, it's the whole thing of like, well, you marry this happy family and stuff like that. If you do notice, though, all those pictures are mainly of him with Catherine and Mary. So I think that in itself kind of speaks volumes that, Kate kind of distanced herself from the family because it was almost like her mom and sister being replaced, so and that's always been a probably strenuous part of that, new family and whatnot. So, but obviously, Kate isn't willing to give up. She's like, if you do keep crossing this line, the fact is I'll have no choice but to treat you as not my sister. But, it's like, what her plans are for Kate, I don't know. Like, especially because she's saying, oh, things aren't going down like that. If you want to kill my boyfriend, kind of showing that she doesn't care about anything or anyone, but I think she does. I mean, hence, I think even more than her boyfriend, I think she cares about Kate the most. So, like, she's trying to maneuver all this to some ultimate goal. What it is, I don't know. And I'm very interested to kind of dive into that. Another neat little element to this episode was the whole, Mary kind of showing like, hey, don't underestimate. Cause I think even Sophie kind of was thinking like, oh, you're taking these type of classes and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, I'm going to like a, medical degree or whatever. And it's like, oh, yeah, but like, because Mary plays herself out to be like a socialite of like, oh, yeah, which doesn't mean she can't be both. Like, whereas like everyone, there's duality to a lot of people. And it seems even Mary has hers where she kind of plays out like the social influencer, socialite. Oh, I'm a little ditzy, but it's like, no, she's actually super smart, and actually super capable on a medical level. Obviously, once again, still got to keep that clinic super secret. So, but even Sophie was kind of impressed. So I thought that was kind of a neat element of her being like, oh, shit, you know your stuff, So catching something even the paramedics missed and most likely saved that lady's life in the process, So, which there was a whole thing of Alice sneaking into the, into Jacob and Catherine's penthouse, which is like, oh, how did she get in? It's like, because that had to be like well after the fact. So, well, maybe because... Well, she probably just has her way. Well, she was probably also able to, because as we can see, she was dressed up in a crow's uniform, so maybe that played into it. But then she killed the guard that came in, so it makes you go like, I don't know. It makes you wonder, did she kill him just because she was in an upset mood? Like, she could have found another way to deal with it, but she chose to kill him. Or maybe it's just because, like, killing him was just kind of the easiest thing, so I guess she didn't really care either way. But, like I said... because now Jacob's in that complicated situation where he is starting to believe that she might be Beth because she played that thing on the violin, or that's probably not a violin, but she played that certain music that was something between him and Beth. But Catherine's like, no, don't think like. But it's like the way Catherine is so adamant about it, because we know Catherine's covering up evidence, but there was those cards that were left. So it's like, what's that about? I guess either that's something Alice left, or is that stuff she found? Because I figured this, I was like, is that makeup? That's Catherine's, and it seemed like she went out of her way to mess with Catherine's stuff the most. So does she know something about Catherine that even he doesn't know? Because letting during the intro, it kind of seemed like the evidence that says like, oh, Beth was gone, didn't that come from like Catherine's like family or something, or who was ever like doing the DNA testing or whatever for that? Because didn't she say like it came? Didn't he say it came from their group? So obviously covering up stuff back then. But the question is, why? And what do those cards represent? Was that something she secretly had? Did she have some connection to Beth getting kidnapped? Was it supposed to be like some? Like, I don't know. Because I'm pretty sure Catherine's the one that comes from the well-off family. Like, they are well-off. It's not necessarily that Jacob is. Jacob kind of married into money, I think, with Catherine and Mary. So I'm like, I don't know what reasoning she had to do all that back then. Like I said, not unless it's a thing of she wanted Jacob and she needed to get... she's a little... I don't know. Maybe it wasn't meant to go down the way it did, and... I don't know, because like for you to cover up that evidence makes me think, not unless Catherine actually has like some secret, I don't know. My mind keeps going in 100 different directions with this whole thing, so I don't know which way to kind of go for it. But it's like, what is she hiding, So that's an interesting thing to it. And because she's so adamant about, no, kill Alice, because she doesn't want Alice in custody to take the chance that, like, oh, I'm sure she's the reason why Alice ended up escaping, because, like I said, she's covering up things. She was probably hoping that Alice would die, but obviously Kate interfered, so, but, yeah, I mean, I'm just interested to find that out, not because she's definitely trying to clean everything up because she is trying to just make sure. And it's like, no, don't just arrest her. Take her down for the safety of her family and stuff like that. You can't let her get in your head. And it's like, you know that she's really his daughter, Beth, and you're trying so hard to force his hand to basically end up killing her. So obviously that's not going to be easy if Kate's going to be there. And even to the point, it's like, oh, but he was like, because she's like, why didn't you take care of this before? And it's like, because Kate threatened to remove herself from my life, which now I think Catherine's sights are going to be set on kind of potentially cutting away Kate, because Kate is going to, it's like, oh, you're infesting your father with these notions that it's bad and it's going to get him killed. She's going to twist everything on him, I'm sure. I'm curious to see where we're going at from. But obviously, like I brought up, it's like Batwoman is officially surface. It's like, I can't be anyone, because she isn't talking about the fact is like she didn't want to, it wasn't the city she was afraid of letting down, it was Bruce, because it's like, because even after all this, it's like, even knowing that such important equipment was stolen, the R&D department was kind of broken into, it still wasn't enough to bring Bruce back. But even Luke was kind of having to face the fact of like, he's hopeful and everything, but even he was like, ultimately, yeah, like this won't bring Bruce back for whatever circumstances. So it's time for a new Cape Crusader to kind of run things in Gotham. Once again, I'll bring up the whole conversation. I am curious what the other the Bat family is like. Like I said, that's probably something they won't tackle because this is Cape's story. So might get some references, but beyond that, so either way, I am very, very interested to see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. And now moving on to this week's episode of Supergirl. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first, the main thing this episode involves this alien that basically attaches itself to an organism, a human host. So basically, it's like this spider thing, but it can make itself 2D on the body, but then also be 3D when it comes to, killing someone. So first there's this dude named Jared Harris who is killed, which is interesting because it's connected to a story that William was looking at, but it was something where it's Jared and Andrea, which then it's like, wait, what's that mean? And obviously, like, it's a story that Kara wants to find out, like, oh, look into it, but William's like, no, don't look into it. It's not worth it or whatever. And obviously, Kara, using her powers, is able to see his heart beats extremely fast, so he knows something more about this. I'm going to be skipping around a lot, but the fact of the matter is we see later on that he gets paid later, because obviously he went to Jared talking about, we need to talk about something, but he wouldn't listen, so I'm wondering what that's all about. So, and the fact is he gets paid later on about like, oh, how much longer do I have to do this? So I'm wondering, is him, like, obviously him being here, like, part of me is wondering, is he trying to kill anyone associated with Andrea? Is he trying to, like, well, no, because it didn't seem like she had any particular connection to him. It looked like it was someone that she met, but maybe anyone that has, like, I don't know, is this something like third party Andrea is setting up to make it so, like, there's a middleman to make it so he wipes out any competition? Maybe it's the thing of, like, where her technology comes from. Maybe it isn't just from her business, that she steals it from other people. Well, because he's connected to the, like, modifying, like, genetics, modifying stuff on a genetic level. So it's like, I don't know how to interpret that. Whether he's part of some organization, he's kind of like the middleman for some organization of kind of like getting rid of certain people. But like, even the fact is that he didn't even, I guess Jarrett was already a target, so he didn't want Kara to see that picture, because it would have, I don't know why, like, a picture of him and Andrea together would have meant anything. And it, like I said, it didn't seem like Andrea was that familiar with him, but it's just like, I don't know. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. Maybe, I don't know. Because it also comes back to, like, well, how deep is Andrea and William's relationship, in the sense of, like, would it be something that, are they chummy enough for there to be something there like that, where it's like, oh, he'd look after her like that type of thing of, like, maybe he owes her his career, or maybe he owes someone else his career, and it's like, oh, maybe all these stories that, maybe it's like, oh, he did do good work from the beginning, but then he started getting mixed up in a bad crowd, or mixed up with a bad group because maybe he owes them money, maybe it's a gambling. Well, no, because he's getting paid, so I wouldn't think that's the case. It wouldn't just be he owes them, or, maybe I don't know. there's got to be something he's benefit from them just besides being paid, or maybe just being paid is all there is to it, which obviously once again brings into question his integrity. But we saw him kind of working out with like a soup kitchen, so it's like maybe that's his way to kind of compensate for like, hey, I'm not 100% a bad guy, even though I'm kind of doing bad things. So that's kind of a big thing, I think, to kind of keep in mind in that regard. I don't know. Like, I don't know what to make of that. Luckily, they were able to stop the alien, well, the lady in particular, the lady assassin, by that was kind of pretty. I felt that doctor or whatever that was the second target. Luckily, Carr showed up in time to like heat vision it off his face before it can go, I guess, 2D and go underneath his skin. But it was just like they were crawling in his face, and she was able to burn it away. But luckily, they were able to kind of suck the alien into like a capsule device. But before they could even question the assassin, some shadow creature ran by, stabbed her through the chest, and just bounced. So it's like, okay, what the hell was that about? Whoever this is has like a large army of like aliens on their side, because this seems like because this particular creature was one of the creatures that got released when Lex stole aliens from the DEO base in the desert. So it's like, okay. So I'm assuming these others have to be the same thing, not unless they're not all aliens. Maybe some of them are metahumans. I'm curious, because obviously there's the whole thing with, Eve, who brought up, Leviathan. That's still something that's kind of lingering from last season. So it's like, is this connected to that? You would assume so. Well, because they do bring in other, we know that Eve was kind of a reluctant participant, so maybe that would explain William's situation. But it didn't seem like Eve was getting paid. It was more so like she was forced into it. So, like I said, I don't know what to make heads or tails of this whole situation. So there's that side of things. Then there's everything with Kelly and Malefic. Interesting enough, he pretends to be someone that she knows named Pete, played by Sean Astin, which is like obviously, from Lord of the Rings, Rudy. Most recently, I think the thing I've seen him in was Stranger Things. I think that's the most recent thing. He played Bob. R.I.P. Bob. But still, I was like, wait, is that Sean Astin? That's awesome. But nevertheless, it's all about trying to reset his brain so that he can get his powers back that he lost, his inception abilities, which sadly he ends up getting at the end. It's kind of interesting because like a theme in this episode is the whole thing about how, the fact is that Kelly is so open, like the fact is she kind of leaves her, like rather than kind of, which is, because she's very optimistic, she talks to people, she kind of really opens up to them and they get open up to her. But at the same time, it's like, because she wears her heart on her sleeve, she listens to people, kind of gets to trying to understand them. I mean, to be fair, it's part of her job, but because of that, she was kind of vulnerable this episode. That's why, Mel was able to kind of just get to her so easily because of just who she is personally, which that same thing kind of reflects with Kara this episode too, but we'll get to that soon enough. So, kind of on the other side of things, we have kind of connecting it all together is the whole, Nia helping John figure out his memories. So they go through his memories, through dreams, and it's like, okay, so his brother wasn't like made the way he was because he was experimented on by the White Martians or something. It's his ability to basically incept minds is something he's always had. I guess it's kind of a bit of a mutation in your family or whatever. Maybe it's just a mutation in White Martians in general. Well, because the thing is, we do see him shapeshift his hand into like a White Martian's hand, but we do know that he's also a Green Martian. So I'm wondering, is it kind of like the thing of Magan, where it's like he's actually a White Martian, but the fact is he disguises himself as a Green Martian? I'm wondering, was that it? Maybe, I don't know. Because we haven't really seen White Martians have that ability too. It seems like that's something specific to him. So it does seem like maybe it was just kind of like a mutation. It is maybe just an ability unique to him. Regardless, because of that, and like he ended up being isolated for so long. He was a little kid and he was in isolation because of his ability and what it could do to people. And that, he was separated. His father and, John ended up, in his eyes, abandoning him. It's like, we'll pray for you to get better. But that's, and I think that's what made him resent his father and his brother, because it's like, you wanted me to pray and you were going to pray, but you left me all alone. Like, rather than finding, because I think for John, there's also the element of like, I didn't kind of go above and beyond. I just kind of was like, oh, like in retrospect now it's kind of a thing like, oh, we didn't try hard enough, you know? It's like now with this new family around him, he knows not to give up. And for him, he probably feels like we gave up on it. And now it's like, because he was driven to the solitude, the only people he could rely on were the white Martians. They were the only people he could count on, and, you know, because he felt like even his own family abandoned him. So they're kind of the catalyst that led to him basically turning on his own people, you know, in the war between the green Martians and the white Martians. And obviously for John at first, he's blaming his dad because it's like he was a holy man and he wiped my brother from both our memories and everyone else's. And that's the biggest crime of their people. That's the biggest, like, no of their people, like, you don't cross that line, you don't do that. And it's like for him, he feels like it's like my dad's supposed to be some peacekeeper, but he was a hypocrite, you know, which is interesting because obviously it hits that spot because all last season all John was trying to do was honor his father, and now we're learning this. But Nia learns that there's actually a deeper truth, that the one who wiped the memory wasn't his father, it was John. Because John wanted to ease his father's pain because his father was trying to give up, because it's like so many people rely on me, but it's like I failed my son, I'm going to fail anyone. How can I be some holy man? He was just giving up in general in life and everything. And John, wanting to spare him that pain, that sorrow, erased his brother from his mind and erased it from his own mind as well. And now and for him it's like, was I really just doing it for my own father's sake, or was I doing it to kind of alleviate my own guilt because I felt like I abandoned my brother too? So it's like, yeah, I want to help my dad, but more so than anything, I erased my memory to kind of ease my own guilt. So it's like, you know, no wonder he is so pissed, because not only because John had brought it up, it's like it's not just bad enough to be dead, to be forgotten is worse. For someone, to even your own family, to not know that you've existed for like the past 300 plus years. All of that, you know, John's been living his life. Even his father died never remembering his brother, and how messed up and morbid it is. And you know that hits John even harder because it's like, it's my fault. My dad died not even knowing he had another son. I took that away from him, you know? It's like, because at the same time, it's like, that wasn't your pain to take away. Like, yes, he was drowning in his pain and you wanted to alleviate it, which is, you know, you had the best of intentions, but at the same time, it's like, that wasn't your right to take those memories from him, you know? It wasn't kind of your own, you know, you yourself, that's one thing, but to take the memories away from someone else, your father, you know, but in his mind, he thought he was saving his father because his father was going to self-destruct from that loss. So now he's asking Nia to keep that secret, which that's another, because more so than anything, he's too ashamed to tell the truth to anyone else, his family, because it's like he doesn't want them to look at him differently, because if they find out the truth, he's afraid they'll look at him like, oh, he's some despicable. It's like, no, your family will be like, but we understand you were trying to save him. And it's like, they won't look at him like a monster, but I think he's afraid that they will, that maybe they won't understand, which they totally will. Because more so than anything, it's not just them, it's because telling them would be, because he's already angry at himself, and it just, the person he's afraid, the reason why he's so afraid to tell them, because it would mean just fully accepting it, which he kind of has, but, you know, it would make it real if he tells everyone else, you know, at least on some subconscious level, there might be a lane of deniability if he doesn't tell anybody else, you know? That's how I kind of chalk it up. So that's interesting. And since we're on the subject of Nia, let's talk about her and Brainy. Obviously, Brainy's going above and beyond with the poems and he, you know, his notions of love and stuff like that, you know. And obviously, it's taking its toll on Nia, but it's like the whole conversation of, if you want to, you know, if it's someone that you really care about, you tell them the truth, even if it hurts them. And she says, I love everything you're doing for me, but the fact is, it's too much. But the sad thing is, for Brainy, it's like, for him, it's like, but this is me. You told me to be completely myself, that I could be completely myself with you, and this is who I am. I don't know how to go half measures. That's just how I'm built. I'm built to give 100%. So, you know, because he is a machine, there's a part of him that is just kind of like, I kind of go all out. Obviously, he's learning a little bit more about human nature and stuff like that, but still, and it's just kind of like, for him to be like, so for Nia, it's like, I don't want you going 100%, but that means, like you saying that you don't want me to be me, because I don't know how to, it's kind of all or nothing for me, you know, and this is just how I am, this is how I'm built, so it's like, if this is too much for you, that must mean that I'm too much for you, you know, so that kind of put a wrinkle in their relationship. I mean, it was only a matter of time because you can tell it was taking its toll on Nia, which is like, I'm curious to see where that ends up going. Like, what that means. Like, is Brainy going to like try to shift himself to be the more perfect match for Nia? It's like, oh, we're not perfect, but it's like, no, I can work, I can change, I can make it work. Maybe he's going to try and modify himself, which maybe that would have catastrophic repercussions. But ultimately, we'll have to wait and see. Getting back to the other plot point I kind of dropped a little earlier was the whole, Kelly and Mel situation. Now that his power of incepting is back, he tries to use it on Kelly to kill herself, but there was a snafu there, and basically she now has a link to him in the sense that she can tell who he is even if he's shifting into another person. It's like, wait, you can see me when I change. So now that makes her a threat, so he'll come after her now. So they have to hide her away, which Jimmy leaves with her, because it's like, yeah, he's got all this other stuff he's got planned for his life, but it's like, the fact is, you're my sister, you take priority over anything, which is also sad now too, because it's like Kelly and Alex are separated, because it's like, we just started this relationship, love is in the air between them, and it's just kind of like, now they had to be separate, which now it's like, well, there's also the parallel of things going, not being 100% once, word I've been using a lot lately, copacetic, between Nia and Brainy too, so that's a whole sad complication in itself. But now you do have Mel out there, and he's full blown, hey, I can basically accept your mind, make you and anyone in general do what I want you to, which is interesting because it's like, that's kind of the lane that Lena is going down to. And I feel so bad because Kara, it's a whole thing of like putting your heart on your sleeve, because Kara is like, she's trying to overcompensate for the fact is, I've spent so much time lying to Lena, she'll do anything because she wants to help her, but at the same time you can make the argument, it's like, you're more so doing this out of selfish reasons because you want you and Lena to be good, so you're almost overcompensating. It's like, yeah, you're helping her in your own way, but at the same time it's like, you're more so doing it for the reasons of like, I want her and me to be good, I want things to kind of be perfect. So that's the kind of lane they're in. So to understand everything that's going down, like to understand how to like fully change people's minds and literally kind of get rid of like their violent, treacherous nature, where things currently stand, if she shifts things too much, people basically become zombies. That's not what she wants. She wants people to say who they are, but be perfect, be better. And so in the end, she manipulates Kara into stealing journals of Lex's to give to her. And Alex is like, don't do that, because for one, it's super illegal, but it's like, obviously, Kara starts bringing up the fact that, well, we kind of do other stuff that's the gray area side of legal, so why would this be different? But it's like, it's be the whole thing of kind of using your power for personal gain, and because it's like, yeah, you're trying to help Lena, but once again, you're doing it for personal reasons of like, you're trying to better your relationship with her, because once again, you're trying to overcompensate. So that's the kind of the lane. Obviously, Alex, really couldn't, because every time Kara kept throwing, examples of like, oh yeah, we're doing this. What about the fact is that Brainy's illegally tapping into this club's cameras to help me with this story? And it's like, yeah, I'm going to have to get stricter on that. But it's like, where do you think we got all this breaking rules stuff from? And Alex is like, that cuts deep. She is kind of the rule breaker. Well, kind of always was. So, which is interesting considering the fact is that she is kind of as strict and, disciplined as she is, to think that she is a kind of a bit of a rule breaker when you think about it in the grand scheme of things. But nevertheless, and even Kara being like, well, the fact is I'm Supergirl, I kind of break the law because I don't 100% go in line with the law because of my heroing, so it's just kind of interesting. So, but Kara nevertheless steals the books because of what Jimmy was saying of just like, oh, you help out a friend no matter what the consequences are, which obviously her helping Lena in this case, the consequences are going to be drastic, which even Kara kind of felt guilty about it, but it's like, hey, I'm helping helping Lena, and it's like, but Lena's basically going to use that to basically warp humanity to be what she wants them to be, which even I'm like, it's hypocritical. You're getting mad at Kara for the fact is of like, oh yeah, you know, the betrayal and all that stuff, and oh, you felt used and lied to. It's like, but you're literally doing the same thing to Kara. Now you're manipulating. She cares about you, but I'm sure she'll justify it by being like, oh, she should have told me the truth. The fact is her and everyone else are blind to me, so it's only right that I pay her back. It's actually kind of interesting too, because I should actually bring this up because I brought up the whole thing about, you know, with Ruby Rose about the whole like accent thing. I think I let it slip my mind that Katie McGrath has an accent. I think what is she? She's Irish, right? Maybe, I forgot. I'm pretty sure she is, but she has an accent, and I'm like, I was watching something. It was like a compilation of just like random like Katie McGrath stuff, and I was like, right, she has an accent, and I think I've gotten so used to her on Supergirl just using an American accent that I kind of forgot. Because I might have brought this up before, but it's like, you know, the thing I best know her like from her work is her playing Morgana in Merlin, which is a great show if you've never seen. I think that's still on Netflix. Because obviously in that, it's like everyone's using British accents because that's everyone's natural accent. So it's like she uses her natural accent in the show. So it's still kind of like, it's still that thing of like when you get used to hearing her, when I got used to hearing her American accent so much, I kind of forget until like, you know, like I said, because the Ruby Rose thing was kind of in my head about, you know, accents and stuff like that. But regardless, it does seem like she is on her way to controlling people, which, like I said, is an interesting parallel because she's trying to better people and, you know, for the sake of the world, whereas that you have, like, Malefic planning to do kind of a similar thing to, I don't know, more so than anything, hurt John, which obviously there's a whole thing of John lying, being like, yeah, I threw my brother in the Phantom Zone. I guess that's why he's pissed at everybody. So I just, like I said, hiding that big secret. So it's interesting the parallels between, you know, Mel and Lena. So I'm curious, are those worlds going to collide? Is he actually going to find out what she's up to and actually going to use her thing with Q waves as a means of boosting his own abilities or something, kind of making it so he can do it to a, maybe it's just one person at a time he can currently do it, but maybe with the Q-Wave thing that Lena's working on, he can expand his abilities, and she might be inadvertently, potentially later on down the road, boosting the main antagonist's abilities. Well, at least one of the main antagonists, because like I said, there's still a whole other lane of things we're dealing with. So I'm very interested to see ultimately where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. And now moving on to this week's episode of The Walking Dead. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I really appreciate that opening of just kind of, hour 1, hour 2, hour 4, hour 11, so on and so forth, until we basically got to hour 49, and I like that. Like, basically, it's like little things here and there, a little Carol, a little bit of just kind of like, oh, let's deal with some walkers. Oh, we're dealing with more walkers. Wait, they're attacking from 2 different fronts. Everyone's kind of sleep deprived and everything, and I like that. I was like, oh man, that's one way to kind of deal with this. They've never had to, like, be on lookout like that for so long. I don't think over the course of the show they've never been in a situation like it was just wave after wave, and in fact the wave actually came from 2 different points at one point. And so now it's like, oh, this must be the Whisperers, which Lydia was like, this actually can't be my mom. It's like, why wouldn't it be? My mom, if it was her, she wouldn't she wouldn't just like, oh, a little here and there. It's like, no, if she wanted to kill us, she'd wipe us all out at once. It's like, well, she could be just tiring us out. But that begs the question, was it actually not her? Was it just kind of just shitty luck that's, maybe they had gathered so many Guardians and some just got away? I doubt that. They're very good at corralling them, so I don't know. Maybe she was changing up her tactics. Maybe someone else went a little rogue. That could be the situation someone else was handling. Because even Gamma showed up and was like, oh, was that her? And it was like, Gamma was like, no, that wasn't her. So it's like, I think there's someone, or maybe there's dissent amongst the Whisperers, someone or some group, depending, because of what Carol said, there was at least 3 out there, but maybe one of them went out there alone, or 1 or 3 might be leading a group of Guardians and coordinating this attack, not listening to what Alpha has to say. Maybe not. I don't know how to, that could be interpreted many different ways, but because Gamma kept saying it wasn't her, and like I said, even Lydia's like, this doesn't seem like my mom's style. My mom wanted us dead, she just full-blown the army. Which, obviously the Highwaymen are pissed. It's like, oh, we got to get justice for our people. But it's like, all right, and Michonne shuts that down quick. All right, how many, Daryl, how many walkers did you see that she had? over like 10,000. It's like, yeah, how you going to deal with that? Oh, you haven't thought about, oh, that's not me being rhetorical. I mean, literally, how are you going to deal with that? She just wants to talk now. If she wants to, she could raise us to the ground. So let's go talk. I think it was kind of a bad idea to bring Carol, but I'm sure Carol was not going to take no for an answer. So they go there. And I love that meeting. I mean, it's so messed up. It's like, oh, we're going to the northern border where all their friends, including Henry, head was chopped off and put on a spike. It's like, ooh, of course, that's going to be the meeting grounds. And it's just like, hey, we went to your territory to put out the fire. It's like, fire is nature. Because obviously, where you have Alpha's stance in the sense of like, this is the way the world is. If that territory was going to get burned, so be it. That's nature. This is us kind of being a part of nature too, because the dead is the way the world really is, and you don't want to accept that. That's your problem. Like, those who can meld with the dead and everyone else. And like you brought up last episode, that's the divide of people. And so for her, it's like, if it was going to burn the territory, it was. But it's like, hey, but we had a territory very close that would have been affected, so that's why we did. Hey, we only stepped in your territory once. And I love that from Alpha being like, actually, you're lying. It's actually been 3 times. I'm like, ooh. It's like, oh, I'm not stupid. We're always watching you. I'm like, that's good. It's like, oh, I gave you 3 chances, but hey, the Whisperers pull out guns. It's like, oh shit. But it's like, hey, context matters. And I'm like, oh, I like that. She does a really good job of playing like the head villain, of just being like, seeming like, oh, because at points it seems like she just, there is some order to her madness, in the sense of like, hey, her being like, we made a deal. It's not, no, I was fair because I let it go once. I let it go twice. And now I'm even potentially letting it go a 3rd time, but obviously you're going to have to, it's like, we ain't going to have to worry about no bloodshed, but I'm going to want more territory. And I'm like, dude, that's nuts. But obviously Carol was like, this is some bullshit. And it's like, oh, no, it's all good. I'll let that slide when her eyes meet my boots, or down there by my boots. Which Carol was like, fuck that. Pulls out the gun, tries to shoot her, but, Michonne got in the way. But, Alpha's like, no, I totally understand. From one mother to another mother. But kind of digging it in deep by being like, oh, your boy? That was the last thing he cried out for when I chopped off his head. Which I'm wondering, is that true? Which is, that shit's just morbid to think about. It's like, once again, that still resonates in my head. It's like, I never would have thought Henry would be dead. That to me was the biggest surprise kill. I mean, to be fair, like Tara and Enos too, especially because Enos had that whole thing, I say Enid. Enid always had that thing about, surviving, So it's just kind of crazy to think that she's going. So it just those deaths just kind of really hit to be like, wow, that's So, and obviously the whole thing with Siddiq, he's like traumatized because of that. He's got PTSD. I really appreciate his doctor buddy kind of like, they're drinking and stuff like that, because he talked, basically he's good, like, oh, he knew a dude that went through the same thing. It's like, yeah, some guy that was tough who would never break until he finally broke with the Adonis-like stature. And he's like, Adonis-like stature? He's like, come on, dude. I mean, I got, when you got it, you got to be a little humble. But I like that. I think having someone to really talk to who can understand what he's going through, it's like, the fact is, you were literally the only one to survive. And that is something a soldier would go through, of being like, the trauma of being, the memory of being there, watching everything go down, being the only one to survive, like survivor's guilt, So all that kind of wrapped in one, and he's just not quite right. Like I said, everyone's like, obviously the people we're seeing kind of be affected by this the most is Siddiq and Carol. Everyone else is affected and they're pissed, but I feel like they're kind of our 2 focus groups of just how it's affecting them differently. Like Siddiq is kind of sadly kind of a little self-destructing on the inside, but Carol is kind of self-destructing on the inside, but also on the outside as well. So, but that's something we'll get to in a second. But for Carol, it's like, no, she needs to die. I'm not going to let this slide. So that turns into a whole interesting thing, because like everyone's sleep deprived and everyone's getting a little snippy with each other. But at the end of the day, Carol thinks she sees 3 people, Whisperers, and then it's like, I love that moment she's looking at the book and she sees, because it reminded me of something I didn't think about, because I brought up the fact is, well, she lost her daughter, she lost Henry. I kept not including the two little girls that her and Tyrese were looking after in season 5. I like that, which that was a whole tragic situation in its own right. But I kept forgetting there was someone else. Who's the other kid that was sitting beside Henry in the book? Because there's at least one. Apparently, there's at least one other kid I'm blanking on. Wasn't that a kid from Jeez. I'm blanking on, because there was one other, or am I thinking of a different TV show? I don't know, because that other kid, I was like, I don't remember who that kid is. I remember the two siblings. I remember them. I remember her own daughter, and I remember Henry. But there was that fifth one in the book. It's like, I don't know. So it's like, obviously, you've lost a lot of kids to a certain extent. So it's like, even more so than I was just thinking about. I was just thinking about the two, but it's like, oh no, you've lost quite a bit. So obviously, that's enough to kind of make you, Plus the fact that she's not sleeping either. And I love how they play with that in this episode. That was so good. Especially because, like, obviously, she's popping those pills. She's like, it's like coffee. So the fact of the matter is she's there. Daryl tells her the story about her dad, about, like, the girl he swore he hit. But it's like, he was a truck driver. He was up, maybe days on end sometimes, because he'd be up to 24 hours straight just to get to his next destination and stuff like that. So it's like, just because I'm not, because she's like, I'm not like a meth smoker like your dad or something. Obviously, she stops herself. She's kind of like I said, she's snippy. But at the same time, it's like, the fact of the matter is, I'm not your dad. It's like, yeah, you're right, you're not. But that doesn't mean I'm wrong. And then she goes and sees, she's walking on patrol. She sees Henry, and it's like, oh, that's interesting. And then she gets attacked, and then she stands up, and Daryl's like, whoa, you okay? Where'd you go? And I'm like, what do you mean, where she went? She was just asleep. She fell asleep, didn't she? And it's like, no, she went somewhere. She was like, no, I was on patrol. So it's like, wait, what? That's what confused me. I was like, what? I was like, dude. I was like, this is trippy. Because I wasn't sure what that really meant. I was like, wait, what? Does that mean, like, because I was like, potentially I thought they did it a little bit, but it's a thing of like, what's real and what's a dream? I think that was kind of like the big thing, because for her, it's like, holy crap. I just thought that was so fascinating, because I was like, so what parts were the dream? Well, because obviously her popping the last pill, because she looks in and she has at least one pill left, so she only took one, but in her dream she had taken both, but it's like, there was still one left. Daryl had never came to tell her. Definitely that up to that story wasn't real, because that wasn't, Daryl was like, my dad wasn't a truck driver, so that was in her dream. And then the fact is, so it's like, when she actually went to go, like, at what point did she wake up at one point and then go back to sleep, or was she asleep the entire time? I was like, dude, this is trippy, and I like that they were kind of, because it plays into the whole thing, and I think of like what's real and what's not. She sees that Whisperer, and she's trying to, she ends up falling into the trap, and she tries slashing them with the knife, but then she pulls out the gun. It only has a single bullet, and it takes a shot, but the person disappears. So I was like, was that in her mind? Even I'm starting to wonder, I'm like, are these walkers even real? Is this all part of her? But it's like, no, the others show up, and all the walkers are dead. So it's like, no, that's 100% real. So it's like, so was it just the Whisperer that was fake? Does that mean the other Whisperers she had saw were fake? I don't know. Obviously, Michonne later on is kind of like, well, because obviously Carol has another dream. She wakes up and it's like, oh yeah, go buy some jam because Daryl's down there making breakfast and everything. And he gives her money. I was like, wait, that's not right. Wait, what? And then Henry's there, and then she wakes up again. Because I don't assume, I was like, she doesn't have a bandage on her arm, so this is definitely a dream, right? And totally ended up being one. But obviously, Michonne thinks she's a little sleep deprived. Everyone is. So it's like, did you see what you saw? And it's like, Michonne's like, only you saw them. And then she brings it up. Daryl's like, do you believe me? And he's like, yeah, but I think there's a part of him, he wants to believe her, but even he recognizes she's not been the same since she got off the boat. He thought being on a boat would kind of bring her some peace or something, but obviously she came back just as, sad and angry. Like, whatever led to the breakup between her and Ezekiel is the reason why things are where they are for Carol. I mean, and it's, like I said, it's understandable. It's like, after everything you've lost, you thought you got a little bit more of that back, but it's just like every time you turn around, like anytime you have a family, it's stripped away from you. And just like for her, she's like, I'm not going to get any peace until Alpha's dead. But at the same time, it's like, even that's not going to bring her any peace. Revenge never does. Once that anger's gone, you have nothing, because revenge is all you have, and you have to always think about what's beyond that. Like, even when you get your revenge, it won't fix the hole in your heart, But it gets revealed the fact is Carol wasn't hallucinating 100% because the fact is it really was because we see there is a whisperer with a gunshot wound. So it's like, okay, so at the very, very least, instead of there being 3, because she could have imagined the other 2, there was at least 1 whisperer. Now the question was, is that someone that was following them because of Alpha's orders, or is that the one that potentially went rogue, or maybe, like I said, maybe part of a group that went rogue, so maybe the other 2 weren't in her head, maybe she did see the other 2. So like I said, that's the thing of like, at least we know at least one of them was real, so that's interesting. But everyone else is still, like I said, I even think Daryl is still kind of questioning her mind. It's like, I want to believe you, but at the same time, I think there's going to be a part of it. It's like, I don't know if I should believe you. But there's also kind of a little side plot they kind of threw in here I thought was kind of interesting, the whole Rosita and Eugene situation. Because obviously it's like, oh, I want to look after you, make sure that, you know, your baby doesn't grow up without a mom. And she's like, the fact of the matter is, Eugene, you're not my baby's dad. You're not me. You will never be anything like that. Which she's like, I'm sorry. I'm just tired. Which he's like, you know, he brings up the whole thing of like, basically your inhibitions are lowered when you're tired, much like when you're sleep deprived, much like when you're drunk. And so the truth, your heart will speak the truth. And it's like, you know, he's like, he was always hoping that something would happen between them and stuff like that. And she's like, oh, so does that mean like our friendship means nothing? And for him, it's like, what kind of friendship is this? It's like, there's a part of me that wanted to stay friends with you because I was hoping that maybe at some point down the road you would see me as much more in a loving sense. But he's like, and if I'm thinking like that, and if I created our friendship on the basis of that, what kind of friend am I? If I'm still thinking the entire time, oh, we're friends, but obviously there's a part of him that wants to be more, that he created this whole friendship so there could be more. I mean, he's had a thing for Rosita since they were first introduced, and obviously that it goes even beyond that, like even beyond when we first got introduced to Rosita, Abraham, and him, you know? Because I think probably on some level he probably feels guilty about it too, because, you know, because it's like he never wanted to listen before, because he's like, oh, she says that now, but eventually things could potentially change. He was so hopeful about it. But the thing I was about to say is, I think maybe it all stems back from, like, remember him talking about, like, the whole reason why Abraham and Rosita were looking after him, because, like, oh, get him to Washington, he'll make a cure, but that turned out to be bullshit. Like, I think, you know, it probably reminds him of a time when he was weaker, you know, and it's just, he probably doesn't like that, so he's, you know, trying to walk away from. I think there's something similar in that regard. So ultimately we see, you know, where things kind of go in that direction. But I thought that was kind of interesting. It's kind of going to cause a divide. There's already like the complicated thing of like Sadiq and Gabriel with that whole thing. Well, you know, Sadiq being the dad, but obviously Gabriel and Rosita being in a relationship, but obviously, you know, Eugene caring about her, even caring for the baby and stuff like that. And I'm sure even that makes him feel even worse, because it's like, oh, I'm taking care of your baby because I thought it may probably potentially make you see me in a different light as well. So it's just like everything's kind of fucked up in that corner. So I'm curious to see ultimately where everything ends up taking us on that front as well. But then there's also, right, the whole situation with Aaron and Negan. It's like, take Negan with you. Gabriel's kind of setting that up, and Negan's like, no. If he doesn't want me, like, I'm totally fine here putting away bodies and picking food and stuff like that. He's like, what? Do you remember our last conversation? Everyone's tired right now. The last thing I want is any of that anger they've got towards the Whisperers kind of pointed at me, like, I want to stay on everybody's good side, so I'm going to stay here, which Gabriel's like, shut up, you're not as tired, you can fight, you're going with Aaron. And it's like, hey, it's like, oh, look at you, putting the stump to use. I'm like, nigga, you don't have to say asshole-ish things, like, you don't have to be so sarcastic all the time. But he's out there with Aaron, and obviously he's fighting with a stick, and it's like, oh, let me pick up this crowbar. And Aaron's like, put it down. It's like, really? I can't even use a damn crowbar to defend myself. It's like, you got me out here fighting with a broomstick. Well, to be fair, Morgan and Henry made it work, so. Which I'm not currently watching Fear of the Walking Dead, so I don't know if he still is currently doing that within the continuity of The Walking Dead. Morgan in particular is one I'm referencing. But nevertheless. And then there was this moment of, like, Negan seeing he's got, like, this rash on his arm at one point in time when he's fighting off other walkers. He ended up using a crowbar. He was trying to bring it up to Aaron, but Aaron's so pissed he doesn't want to hear it. Because, you know, during their battle with the Saviors, his husband died. I mean, it wasn't necessarily 100% Negan, but it was indirectly Negan's fault. Because, I mean, you could even make argument directly because it was the Saviors, a battle with them that led to Eric dying. But obviously it turned into a back and forth between them where it's the whole thing of, like, well, your husband died because the fact of the matter is in this world, and it's not just this world, it's kind of how things were before. If you want to protect, if you want something that's yours, you need to fight to protect it, or it's going to be someone else's. And then obviously Aaron, being hurt by this statement saying like, oh, it's my own fault, because Aaron already feels guilty about it, but it's the whole thing of probably like, you need someone else to blame, so he blames Negan, which Negan's at fault too, but I think there's already a part of him that blames himself as well. I mean, to be fair, like, he counts as one of the reasons why they crossed into the Whisperer's territory. He says it, it's like this and that, but he came up and made excuses. But then at the same time, it made him finally realize, like, all right, yeah, obviously Michonne and Bridges and stuff like that, So it's just kind of interesting, he's not thinking straight. He's kind of flying by the seat of his pants. But he brings up the whole, like, oh, your wife situation, which obviously probably also hurts Negan too, because it's like, well, let's not forget he doesn't have Lucille anymore, so I'm wondering, is that ever going to come back to being his or not? Because we haven't seen Lucille in a long-ass time. So I'm curious, like, if anything is ever going to happen on that front with him getting Lucille back. Now, that'd be really interesting if they'd be like, oh, he's back and he's fully powered up. Oh, you thought he was strong before. He's totally going Super Saiyan 4. I know, it's first thing that came to my mind. Actually, Super Saiyan came to my mind, but I was like, why not go further? Even though that's not canonical to DBZ anymore. Whole tangent. Extra nerdy stuff upon nerdy stuff that you don't care about, I'm sure. Regardless. But it was interesting because obviously, Aaron gets, because they're covered in this particular, I forgot what Negan called it, but basically it was something, it basically causes rashes and blindness. And Aaron's kind of like trying to track down Negan because he's like, oh, why don't you just run away? For him, it's like, I did what I needed to do back then, I did what I did, but I'm not that person anymore. But obviously Aaron doesn't want to listen because, I mean, a lot of people didn't want to listen to the fact that potentially Negan has changed. It took a while for even Michonne to kind of see, like, you're helpful in your own right. It took Judith kind of pointing out, like, hey, I mean, even that was even a complicated thing. And so, regardless. So, there's that. And as, Aaron is hiding out in this little house, Negan's there, but obviously he can't see him because Aaron's eyes are still kind of messed up, so his vision's super messed up, so he can't see Negan in the corner. Two walkers come in, and Negan comes to the rescue. He's like, because like the thing is, he was sitting over in the corner super quiet, so it's like, what am I going to do? It's like, well, because there's a chance that if I tell him I'm right here, it might be more of an issue. I might as well just kind of like let something happen to him. It's like, fuck it. He came to the rescue. I guess that was his way to be like, you know what? I could have just let you die, but I'm not. He's pretending like, nah, I found you because I saw the light. Your light flipped on, and it's like, yeah, no, more or rather the fact that you were sitting in a corner and you just felt guilty and you didn't want him to die. But obviously we won't tell him that story. So I think at the very least this rewarded Negan with a little more good grace, and definitely in the Aaron department, and maybe that'll spread amongst the other groups, the other people as well. So some very, very, very interesting developments we find ourselves in. So obviously, like I said earlier, the Whisperer's territory has expanded now. So I am curious ultimately to see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. Like I said, particularly finding out like if that wasn't Alpha behind those Walker attacks, who was it then? So we'll ultimately have to wait and see. And now moving on to the series premiere of Watchmen, a great series premiere. I do like the fact of the matter is we kind of get a good starting off point, kind of letting us know, because obviously, it was kind of interesting how we started off, obviously, in Tulsa in 1921, and then it seems like that might be disconnected, but in the long run, it ends up seeming like that's tying into the present day story, because the story is taking place present day. Obviously, it's been like 30 years since the events of Watchmen. Also note, if you are unaware, this is supposed to be pulling more so from the graphic novel / comic book. I think it might just be a comic book. I don't know if it's a graphic novel. Regardless, it's pulling from the comics continuity rather than the movies, because there is differences. Like, obviously, something that kind of pops up in this is the fact is that at moments there's rain where little squids come down, which is obviously tying into, and I like that. It's because that way you don't have to make it like a big thing, because obviously, whether in the movie it was the whole Dr. Manhattan situation of making it seem like he was responsible, but it was more so like a intergalactic squid was the enemy that kind of set everything in motion. Like that's the big difference between the comic book and the movie. I've never read the comic book myself, but I was curious to see like what the differences was, and that was one of the differences, is that ending. Similar results, just kind of different ways to get there in certain regards, but nevertheless. That's just me kind of throwing that out there, because I was wondering, because I thought it was kind of neat, because even it's like in the classroom it says like anatomy of squid. I was like, oh, I was wondering if that was the only wink and nod we were going to get to that, but obviously it's like it was a pretty big thing. But what I think is kind of neat, what they're setting the story up to be, is it seems like obviously Tulsa's situation might just be Tulsa's, but you kind of get the assumption that it's at the very least a nationwide thing, at the very least maybe in the U.S. I think slowly but surely you're going to get more like worldwide impact, because I think that's so interesting. It seems like this is going to be a very small scale story, but it might have larger world implications in it. I don't know. But it's just interesting kind of learning about where the state of the world is, because we learn like Vietnam is apparently part of the U.S. now. Because it's like, oh, and because apparently Angela was born in Vietnam. It's like, oh, is that before or after it was a state? And it's like, before. And everyone kind of gave her a look like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I guess just because it's like, it's just kind of like before. And I'm wondering, like, because obviously it wasn't like that in the movie, but I don't know if that could be something where the movie didn't acknowledge it, but maybe that's something that happened in the comic book, or maybe that's just something that already happens like years down the line in that continuity. Whatever the case may be, I just thought that was kind of an interesting little detail to kind of throw that in there as well. But I also love the premise behind it, where it's like cops have to be like wearing masks to hide their identity, because there's an event that went down that Angela refers to as White Night, where basically a whole bunch of bad people found out, because they knew were cops' identities, went to their houses and attacked them. So now cops are hidden. Like some cops are like, basically they come up with excuses of like, oh, why so-and-so significant other isn't around. Like, for example, Angela's cover is that she works at a bakery. It's like, yeah, she was a cop when she was in Vietnam and before she came here to Tulsa, because she wasn't born in Tulsa. I mean, yeah. So it's like she was a cop until White Night, but now it's just kind of like everyone's trying to be like, oh, if you're like the whole point is like to wear a mask and hide. Like even from the trailers, I was like, that's such an interesting concept, and especially because when you think about it in the full scale of things, it's kind of like, well, there was the whole anti-vigilante things during the events of Watchmen, and now we see police wearing masks like vigilantes, so it's just interesting to see it almost kind of come full circle in a certain regard. I mean, obviously, I think that's something that's going to play a role in this particular story, is the difference between a vigilante and a cop, because I talked about my favorite line from the trailer involving Gene Smart, kind of saying that line. But like I said, we'll get to that when the time comes. But I just think that's such an interesting concept to kind of circle back on in certain regards. So what's also interesting too, because cops are in this interesting situation where it's like, oh, they can't use their guns, but they have to be like they have to kind of do a check off list of like this, and this. Which obviously there's a part of me that's like, oh, like you can see obviously Charlie's situation is a circumstance of like it's a situation where you're like, you wish you could have got to his gun sooner. But obviously when it comes to police, there's also the situation of like, yeah, there's moments where you don't want them to be able to get to their gun. So there's a give and take with that, like checks. It's an interesting checks and balances to kind of keep it so that you're not just like free willy-nilly just shooting people with your gun. Like there's some like I said, some red tape you have to basically cut through, which obviously kind of puts you in a situation of like, well, a cop could BS it, and I think that's a lane they're going down. But another fascinating thing is the cult of Rorschach, and it's not even just called the cult, it's just called the Cavalry, the 7th Cavalry in particular. Turns out it's a group of racist. I didn't expect that to be the thing of like, kind of like white nationalists, trying to purify everything from, just black people in general, as well as white people who are, traitors to their race or something. I was like, holy crap. The thing Rorschach's whole deal would, spawn into this. But it's like, because it was really interesting, because obviously like later on, side note, that actor, isn't that the same actor who from Mother, Where Art Thou, and he played Buster Scruggs in The Ballad of Buster Scruggs? That might not be the same actor. He might look like him, but that might not be him. I wasn't 100% sure, but the dude with the silver mask, he's interrogating the guy and asking those questions, and they make a wink and a nod to like, oh, do you think the government's behind the intergalactic squid situation? I'm like, I like that, you know, like once again, kind of showing the bigger world issues, and that's a conspiracy theory. I like that because that means that it's not like 100% of the nation was full. Even after everything that was kind of lost and sacrificed, there's still cracks to that story that they filled in. Like I said, I'm not that familiar with the comic book, but even just taking what I know from the movie, which I rewatched in preparation for this, even with that, you know, like I said, they're being different. Like I said, there is crossover enough for it to still apply, even if I'm not familiar with the comic books. But I think with everything you sacrifice, the cracks to that are still kind of, it's still, people kind of saw through it as bullshit. Well, at least some people did. And it seems like the cavalry believes that to be the case. So for them, it's also about taking down liberals and their tiers. They're going like full blown. I just wasn't expecting that. It's kind of crazy to think that this would be Rorschach's legacy to a certain extent. But once again, like from what I was reading a little, it didn't seem like there was that big of a difference between Rorschach in the movie and who he is in the comic book. The comic book goes more into his backstory than the movie does. Other than that, so I don't know. Not unless there were elements to Rorschach's character that didn't really hit me to be like, well, there's certain things that kind of made me go, I don't see him kind of going to the extreme that the cavalry is, definitely, you know. So, but I guess it's just interesting that it makes you wonder, why did they pick Rorschach? Obviously, he was about exposing the truth, with obviously this is all coming back from the fact is that he did to a certain extent, because to be fair, it's like, you know, his last little joke. So it begs the question of like, what kind of effect it did have on the world? I mean, obviously it's enough that squids are still falling from the sky. So is that something like Ozymandias is still upkeeping to kind of keep up with the lie? Or was it something when his initial lie was created, it created this effect on the world that every once in a while it comes through, which is even interesting because Angela's kid was like, oh, maybe it's a false alarm. So it's like, I don't know, we'll see about that. But a little bit of an interesting thing was the dude in red who's working with the cops, the dude in like kind of like the red jumpsuit and the red mask. I was like, that's the actor who played Withers, Garrett's dad on The Outpost. I was like, oh, it's Withers. I kind of lost my damn mind in that regard. So I was like, oh, that's pretty dope. And maybe I'm reading too much into this, but I'm curious, like, is that when Angela was interrogating that dude and you see like water, I don't know what that's supposed to be, water, what's that supposed to be, piss, but there's blood trilling through it. I wonder, is that supposed to be like a slight wink and nod to the Rorschach scene, like when he was busting out of prison in the movie, like the final thing he does, like in the bathroom with that dude, like that. I wonder, is that supposed to be a wink and nod to that scene or not? I just assume so, just because like but maybe not. Maybe that's just, like I said, me just reading too much into it. It was pretty badass, that moment of like them infiltrating. They're trying to attack the compound, and then like the guy gets on the like that machine gun and like mowing down all those cows, and they have to hide behind the cows and stuff. I'm like, your lucky cows are so thick because those bullets are ripping into them, which is like, because I got nothing against cows, so it did kind of suck to be like, oh, seeing them kind of ripped apart like that. It's kind of like, oh, that's depressing. And I was like, wow. I wonder where her training comes from. Is that just 100% just being a cop? Because it just, I mean, like I said, I guess they kind of have to escalate it a little bit, under these circumstances. So it's like, it's not just being a cop. You gotta have a little extra, for the fighting and stuff like that. I actually thought it was kind of interesting too, because Judd sets up this whole thing of like, because like Panda, he's the one that's kind of like, no, we need to check all the boxes. It's kind of like, do you guys feel like your life is threatened? Is kind of what Judd was like. It's like, oh, you guys do? Everyone agrees? Okay, now everyone able to lock and load it. Let's kick some ass, essentially. Well, it's kind of interesting. What I also find fascinating is that him and the other Judd and that lady were in Archie, which is like, okay, so does everyone have an Archie, or is it just Judd that has one? Which means that, because they focused on that picture, and I was like, there's something I'm supposed to be getting from this, but I'm not getting. I don't know whether that's supposed to be a detail where it makes sense more later on, or is that just supposed to represent, and like, I don't know. I felt like there was a big detail that was shown there. I was like, yeah, I'm an idiot and I'm missing it. There's something here. I just couldn't quite. I'm too stupid to figure out what it was they were trying to imply with there. Like I said, I don't know whether that's something they're zooming in now, and it means much more later on where you kind of feel like, because a lot of this is kind of just throwing you into this world. You get little details trickled in here and there, but obviously, I think hopefully, because, because this is by, was it Damon Lindelof, who was behind Lost and the Leftovers, if you want to go HBO-wise, which I still should circle back around to that show. I only ever saw the first season and parts of the second season. I really enjoyed it. It's just a show that it just kind of fell off from, so I just need him regardless. Typically, his shows are kind of that thing of like, there's a lot of unanswered type of stuff. So, with the way this show is supposed to be structured, I'll potentially get into that later on. It's not, this seems like it's going to be like a one-off thing. Like, this entire season is going to be it. I mean, I guess it depends on how well the show does, but it seems like it was designed to be a one-off. So, I think we're going to get like a lot of questions, but we are going to get answers, I think, in most part. But obviously, it's, regardless of the whole situation, it just came to my mind because I'm like wondering, it's like, because there's going to be, like I said, filling in a lot of holes of like, oh, what's really going down in this world the past 30 plus years, filling in questions like, oh, like I said, because its entire show seems like it's going to take place in Tulsa, and I'm curious, are we even going to go outside of Tulsa? Will it, like I said, it seems like a small scale story, but there might, like I said, be worldwide implications for it. So I'm curious why this specific location, because obviously, like, there's a little boy, which that was kind of horrendous. His parents sending him off. He's peeking through the hole in the box, and he sees the place that they were just at exploded. The mom and dad that were taking him somewhere, they're both dead, and it's up to him to carry that little baby. And I was like, that's madness. Just those circumstances of that little boy having to take care of a baby. It's like, holy shit, that was just that moment of just seeing him carry that baby was just kind of like, I don't know, it hit just in many different regards. I'm like, that's nuts, I don't know why that just hit me the way it did, but regardless. Then there's also the whole thing about the Calvary, where they're taking out, what was it, like the battery to watches, but a specific battery, because it's like, oh, these potentially gave people cancer, which I'm like, is that supposed to be kind of a wink to nod to the whole like Dr. Manhattan thing in a sense? But then that was kind of a movie thing. I don't know if that was a comic book thing. See, that's the confusing part about not being well versed in a comic book at all, that I don't know what, because I don't know if they're going to blend stuff or is it just purely taken from the comic book. They might winks and nods to continuity that might be in the movie, but I feel like stuff in the movie might contradict what's in the comic book, but also there's certain things where it's more so like it just didn't go as in depth as the comic book did. It's a movie, because I think I saw the regular version. I don't think it was like the director's cut of it, because I think there's at least 3 versions of the Watchmen movie. Regardless, once again going in a bit of a tangent, but nevertheless. But Angela had thrown out the idea, well, because, Joe was kind of joking, being like, oh, you think they're going to make some cancer bomb? But it's like, the fact is they're going through so much trouble to do all that makes you go, what are they doing that for? My mind immediately went to, are they trying to make like a bomb with like shrapnel or something? Like, that's what I thought at first, but maybe not. I don't know. It's like, what are they up to? Because obviously this seems like it's one small chapter of the Calvary. Or is the Calvary just a Tulsa thing? To be fair, they brought up the fact is that they thought they disappeared because it was like, it's been 3 years of peace, but now they come up because it's like, why did they try to attempt to kill Charlie? It's because, oh, he stumbled across something he shouldn't have, like, because it was just cabbages, but it might have been something else that was in the back of that truck. So I don't know. Even doing the whole capsule thing of cyanide or whatever is kind of interesting too, which, well, we know on certain side of things where that came from, the Ozymandias side of things, but that was, once again, the movie, so I don't know. I mean, I guess it's the just go-to way to just kind of make sure no one knows, you avoid being forced to talk, so. Which, there was an interesting thing, because obviously we got Jeremy Irons, which DC connection-wise is interesting, because obviously, don't forget, he was, played Alfred in, Batman v Superman. He was also in Justice League too, right? It's been a while since I've seen both of them, but yeah, I'm pretty sure he was in both of them. Yeah, so that's neat. Side note, I kind of lost my shit. I need to look into it, but I'm fairly certain that when the dude that serves him, I think his name was Philip, because there's a lady in the dude, I'm pretty sure that's the actor who played Ichabod Crane in the Fox show Sleepy Hollow. It's a TV adaptation of the story to a certain extent, but I'm like, holy shit, because it threw me for a loop, because I know, like, typically, like, I think the Ichabod hair he had was a wig, I'm fairly certain, so typically I think he has shorter hair more often than not, but I'm not used to seeing him without facial hair, so it threw me for a loop. But I'm pretty sure that was him, because I was losing my shit. I really loved that show. I wish there was more of it, but sadly that wasn't the case. But nevertheless, you know, if you ever get the chance to, I highly recommend that show, especially if you're looking for something police procedural, crime drama meets supernatural and fantasy, and more so fantasy, but it does have like a procedural element of like, oh, monster of the week type of vibe. Regardless, it's a whole thing I'm going in a tangent about, so I do apologize, but it's interesting. He was like, oh, I'm writing a play, and it's the watchmaker's son, which is interesting. I don't know if that's supposed to be like a... Once again, that's kind of my problem with being so ignorant to the comic book, because I'm sure there's references there I'm not getting, because immediately my brain kind of goes like, well, the only person we know connected to watches is Dr. Manhattan, so is that what that's supposed to be? Is this supposed to be like something associated with like, is it the play supposed to be about Dr. Manhattan, or is it supposed to be about maybe Dr. Manhattan's son, which, I mean, we saw a little bit that he's on Mars, but it's like, at what point did he go back to Mars? Maybe he went to Mars at the end of the comic book. Once again, it's like how much is it similar? Like, I don't know him going to Mars in general. I think that was something probably in both the movie and the comic book. Maybe I didn't, from what a little bit I read, I didn't see anything saying that wasn't in both versions. But regardless, like I said, so I'm curious what else is he doing on Mars. What has he been doing this entire time? Like, it seemed like he was building something, but then it kind of comes crumbling down, and it's like, okay, so like I said, there's a lot to this to be like, okay, so what does that mean? Angela gets called out by that dude, and she finds Judd there hanging, and he's dead, and obviously you can't help but love the symbolism of like blood dripping down and landing on his badge being symbolic of obviously when the comedian died. Which also, there's like a new, was it like a movie or TV show about the American hero story? It's Home Dude, who's one of the, I guess, is he a legacy of like the whole Minutemen? Because he was one of the Minutemen. I forgot his name. But is that like his grandkid or something like that, taking up his mantle or something? I don't know. Or maybe it's just supposed to be a movie about him in particular. Maybe it's not just about like... Well, because, yeah, I'm about to say, because it can't be some... Because obviously the whole anti-vigilante thing, which, I mean, who's to say there hasn't been other vigilantes kind of kicking up? I mean, I guess, sadly, the most extremist side of things kind of found itself under the umbrella of Rorschach. So, you know, I guess that's its own thing. But like I said, that dude... Who is the old man? And obviously he called Angela out. He knows who she is. He knows who her dad is. So it's like... Who are you? Which, I mean, maybe it has to deal with the baby that he brought in. Maybe the baby he brought in was her... Well, because I don't know if that was a little boy or a little girl, like the baby. So that could have been like her grandmother, or... Well, because that was in 21, so it had to be like her grandmother or grandfather. I'm assuming that was like her grandmother or something. That's what I potentially associate that with. But regardless, so it's like... There's a connection there. Well, no, because it can't... Well, because she was in Vietnam. Well, that doesn't mean that she wasn't... Like, her grandma could have been in Tulsa, but then, like... Well, because that was... Tulsa was basically burning at that time. We literally saw that as they were walking away. So, it could have been a thing that eventually she was raised in Vietnam, or at the very least lived in Vietnam for a while, had a kid, and eventually Angela was born there and kind of came back full circle. So, it's almost like, you know... This special place has a special connection to Angela, you know, so... like I said, a lot of questions I have, but like I said, a very nice start to this series, kind of diving into this world and just understanding like where things currently stand, you know? It's actually pretty dope. So I'm actually really excited to see where the next episode takes us going forward. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, love life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.